Most people think getting to $1 million changes everything. But here's what nobody tells you. The jump from $0 to $10,000 will transform your life more than going from $900,000 to $1 million ever will. And I'm about to show you exactly why that is. Look, we've all seen those videos where people talk about making $1 million like it's some magic number that solves all your problems. But after watching hundreds of people hit these different money milestones, I started noticing something weird. The happiness, the freedom, the actual changes in someone's life, they don't scale the way you'd think. Today, we're breaking down what actually happens at $10,000, $100,000, and $1 million. Not the Instagram version, the real version. And by the end, I'm going to tell you about the guy who had $3 million and was more stressed than when he had nothing. Because understanding this might completely change how you think about building wealth. Here's the thing that messes with most people's heads. We grow up thinking money works like a video game. You level up, life gets proportionally better, right? You go from broke to 10,000, cool. Then 10,000 to 100,000 should feel 10 times better. And 100,000 to $1 million, that should be absolutely life-changing, 10 times more than the last jump. But that's not how it works in real life. Not even close. I've talked to people who cried when they hit their first $10,000 saved, like actual tears. Then I've talked to people who hit $1 million and felt almost nothing. Some even felt more stressed than before. How does that make any sense? The problem is, we're chasing these numbers without understanding what they actually do for us. We're running a race without knowing where the finish line is or what we're even racing toward. And this confusion keeps people stuck in two really dangerous mindsets. The first group thinks small numbers don't matter. They're waiting for that big break, that huge payday, before they start taking money seriously. They've got maybe $2,000 in their account and they're thinking, what's the point of optimizing this? What's the point of learning about money when I'm working with crumbs? So they spend everything, save nothing, and stay stuck at zero. The second group is even more trapped. These are people who hit 100,000, sometimes even more, and they're still living like they're broke. Still terrified. Still feeling like they're one bad month away from disaster. They hit these milestones and feel nothing because they don't actually understand what they've accomplished or what it means for their life. Both of these groups are suffering from the same issue. They don't understand what each level of wealth actually unlocks. They don't know what game they're playing. And that's exactly what almost destroyed my own financial progress 3 years ago. But I'll get to that story in a minute. Let's start with $10,000. Now, I know some of you are thinking that's not a lot of money. And you're right, it's not generational wealth. You can't retire on it. You can't buy a house with it in most places. But here's what $10,000 actually represents, and why it's probably the most important milestone you'll ever hit. $10,000 is freedom from chaos. Think about your life right now if you don't have this saved up. Your car breaks down, that's a crisis. Your laptop dies, that's a crisis. You need a root canal, crisis. Someone you love needs help, crisis. You get laid off, immediate panic mode. Your entire existence is one unexpected expense away from falling apart. This is what psychologists call scarcity mindset, and it's absolutely brutal. When you're in scarcity mindset, you can't think long term. You can't make good decisions. You're constantly in survival mode, just trying to make it to next week. Studies show that financial stress literally lowers your IQ by about 13 points. That's the same effect as missing a full night of sleep. You're trying to make smart life decisions while your brain is running on half power. But here's what happens when you hit that $10,000 mark. Suddenly, normal life problems become inconveniences instead of catastrophes. Your check engine light comes on? Annoying, but you'll handle it. You need a new phone? You'll figure it out. Someone invites you to a wedding in another state? You can actually go without destroying your budget for 3 months. This is the milestone where you stop living paycheck to paycheck, where you stop having that knot in your stomach every time you check your bank account, where you can actually breathe. Let me tell you about Sarah. She's a teacher, makes about $48,000 a year. Nothing crazy. For years, she had maybe $500 in savings on a good month. Then her transmission died, $1,800. She had to put it on a credit card at 22% interest. That one expense took her almost 2 years to recover from because of the interest. 2 years of her life basically on hold because of one car problem. But then something clicked. She got serious, started tracking every dollar, cut back on stuff that didn't matter, picked up some tutoring gigs on weekends. It took her 14 months, but she hit $10,000 saved. And about 2 months after that, her water heater exploded. $1,200 to replace. You know what she told me? She said it was the first time in her adult life that an emergency didn't feel like the end of the world. She was annoyed, sure, but she handled it, moved on, and kept building. That shift from crisis to inconvenience, that's what $10,000 buys you. And here's the part that nobody talks about. Getting to $10,000 teaches you something that no amount of money can buy. It teaches you that you're capable of controlling your money instead of your money controlling you. That first $10,000 is hard, really hard, because you're building the habit from scratch. You're learning to say no to stuff you want. You're learning to plan ahead. You're learning to be patient. I've seen people's entire personalities change when they hit this milestone. They stand up straighter. They speak with more confidence. They start thinking bigger about their lives because they're not drowning anymore. That $10,000 in the bank does something to your psychology that's hard to explain unless you've experienced it. But here's what's crazy, and this is something I didn't understand until I was way past this point. That same $10,000 can also trap you if you don't know what comes next. More on that in a second. Now, let's talk about the jump from $10,000 to $100,000. This is where things get really interesting because this milestone isn't about surviving anymore. This is about options. $100,000 represents real flexibility in your life. This is where you start to feel like you have actual choices about your future. You're not just picking between bad and worse anymore. You're picking between good and better. Here's what's different at this level. First off, you can weather almost any normal life storm without it destroying your plans. Someone gets sick, you've got it covered. You lose your job, you've got months, maybe even a year or more, to figure it out without panic. Your industry starts looking shaky, you have the runway to retrain, to pivot, to wait for the right opportunity instead of jumping at the first thing that comes along. But it goes deeper than just having a bigger emergency fund. At $100,000, you start to see how money can make more money. If you've got that $100,000 invested reasonably, you're probably making somewhere around $8,000 to $10,000 a year just from growth, assuming average market returns. That's almost a $10,000 raise that you didn't have to work for. Think of money like a garden. When you're planting your first seeds, you're doing all the work. You're out there every day, digging, planting, watering, pulling weeds. It's exhausting, and you can barely see progress. That's 0 to 10,000. You're trading pure time and effort for every dollar. But once your garden starts to mature, something magical happens. The plants start dropping seeds on their own. New growth appears without you doing anything. You still tend the garden, but now the garden is also working for you. That's $100,000. Your money starts making baby money, and those baby money dollars grow up and make their own baby money. You're not just working for money anymore. Your money is working for you. Now, you're not retiring on that, but think about what that means psychologically. Every year, while you sleep, while you work your normal job, while you live your normal life, your money is generating what might have taken you months or even a year to save when you were starting out. You're starting to see how the game actually works. This is also the milestone where you can start making moves that change your trajectory. You can invest in yourself in serious ways. You want to start a business, you've got some cushion to try, you want to go back to school, you can make it work. You want to take a year and write that book, or build that app, or travel. and figure out what you actually want to do with your life. At 100,000, these things move from fantasy to actual possibility. Here's something else that changes at this level. Your relationship with risk transforms. When you're at 0 or even 10,000, risk feels terrifying because you have no margin for error. But at 100,000, you can take calculated risk. You can pass on the safe job that makes you miserable and hold out for something better. You can negotiate harder because you're not desperate. You can walk away from bad situations because you have options. I learned this the hard way. When I had about 15,000 saved, I was in this job that was slowly killing my soul. I'm talking Sunday night anxiety, waking up with chest pains, the whole thing. But I was terrified to leave because 15,000 felt like nothing. What if I couldn't find another job? What if I ran out of money? So I stayed for another 2 years, and in that time, I managed to build up to about 90,000. And you know what changed? Nothing about the job market. Nothing about my skills. The only thing that changed was my buffer. And suddenly, leaving didn't feel scary anymore. I gave my notice, took a month off to reset, and found something way better. Those 2 years I spent miserable because I didn't understand what level I was actually at. That's time I'll never get back. But here's where people get it wrong. They think the jump from 100,000 to a million is going to feel the same as the jump from 0 to 100,000. They think it's going to be this massive life change. And it's not. Not in the way they expect. In fact, this is where that guy I mentioned at the beginning comes in, and his story is going to blow your mind. Let's talk about $1 million, because this is where things get complicated. $1 million sounds like a dream, right? It's the number everyone thinks about. It's what every movie and TV show tells you means you've made it. You hit $1 million, you're rich, you're set. Life is easy from here. Except that's not really true anymore, and it hasn't been for a while. Here's the reality of $1 million. Yes, it's a huge accomplishment. Yes, you should absolutely be proud if you get there. But $1 million today isn't what $1 million was 30 years ago. Inflation has completely changed what this number means. If you've got $1 million and you want to retire on it, you're probably looking at being able to safely withdraw about $40,000 a year, maybe $50,000 if you're aggressive and willing to take some risk. That's using the old 4% rule that financial advisors talk about. Is that a comfortable life? Sure, in a lot of places. But it's not private jets and yachts. It's a middle-class retirement. Here's what actually changes when you hit $1 million. You get real security. Not just emergency fund security, but long-term security. You know that unless something absolutely catastrophic happens, you're probably going to be okay. If you keep working, you can live pretty much however you want, within reason. If you want to retire early, you can probably make it work if you're smart about it. But here's what doesn't change as much as people think. Your day-to-day life probably looks pretty similar. You're still shopping at the same stores. You're still living in a similar house or apartment, maybe a bit nicer. You're still hanging out with the same people, doing similar things. You're not suddenly living in a different universe. The biggest thing that changes at $1 million is actually pretty subtle. It's peace of mind. It's knowing that you and your family are going to be okay. It's being able to help people you care about when they need it. It's not having to check your bank account before saying yes to something you want to do. It's freedom from financial anxiety. But here's the really interesting part that nobody tells you. For a lot of people, the stress doesn't go away at $1 million. It just changes shape. Now, instead of worrying about making money, you're worrying about keeping money. You're worried about market crashes. You're worried about making mistakes. You're worried about people finding out and treating you differently or asking for handouts. Some people feel guilty. Some people feel like they still don't have enough because they're comparing themselves to people with 10 million or 100 million. Let me tell you about Marcus. This is the guy I mentioned at the start. Marcus built a successful online business, sold it for $3.2 million after taxes. He was 34 years old. Set for life, right? I ran into him about 8 months after the sale, and I expected to see this happy, relaxed guy living his best life. Instead, he looked terrible. Hadn't slept well in weeks. He told me he was more stressed than when he was broke and grinding 18-hour days to build the business. Why? Because now he was paralyzed. He had this huge pile of money and he was terrified of doing the wrong thing with it. Should he invest it all? What if the market crashes? Should he buy real estate? What if he overpays? Should he start another business? What if he loses it all? He'd spent so many years in building mode that he had no idea how to just be wealthy. Plus, suddenly everyone wanted something from him. His brother needed a loan. His parents wanted him to buy them a house. Friends expected him to pick up every tab. He felt guilty saying no, but resentful when he said yes. The money didn't solve his problems. It just gave him expensive new ones. This is why you hear stories about lottery winners who win millions and end up miserable. The money didn't fix the underlying issues. It just changed the scenery. And this brings us to the real secret that nobody wants to talk about. So here's the real secret that ties all of this together. The thing that nobody wants to admit because it's not sexy and it doesn't make for good Instagram content. The happiness, the freedom, the peace of mind. It doesn't come from hitting these numbers. It comes from the process of building toward them. Think about it. That person who grinds, from $0 to $10,000. They're learning discipline. They're learning to delay gratification. They're learning that they can set a goal and hit it. They're becoming someone who can build wealth. And that transformation is worth more than the $10,000 itself. The person who goes from $10,000 to $100,000. They're learning patience. They're learning about investing and compound growth. They're learning to think long term. They're learning to make bigger decisions and take calculated risks. That education is priceless. And the person who builds to $1 million, they've spent years, maybe decades, becoming the type of person who can create and manage serious wealth. They've developed skills and habits and ways of thinking that are worth way more than the money sitting in their account. This is why people who win the lottery almost always end up broke again. They get the money, but they didn't get the transformation. They didn't become wealthy people. They just became broke people with temporary access to a lot of money. The real milestone isn't a number in your bank account. It's who you become while building toward that number. Here's what I mean by that. The version of you that has $10,000 saved isn't just someone with more money than broke you. They're more disciplined, more patient, more confident, better at saying no to dumb purchases, better at planning ahead. That person is capable of things that broke you wasn't capable of. And the version of you that has 100,000 saved, that person has proven they can stick with a long-term plan for years. They understand delayed gratification at a deep level. They're not rattled by short-term problems. They think differently about opportunities and risk. That's a completely different human being than the one who started with nothing. This is the game within the game. You're not just building wealth. You're building yourself into someone who can handle wealth. And I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't understand this for the longest time. I thought hitting certain numbers would fix things. That once I had enough money, I'd feel different. I'd be happy. I'd be free from all the anxiety. And when I hit those numbers and still felt empty, I thought something was wrong with me. It took me way too long to realize that I was chasing the wrong thing. The number was never the point. The person I was becoming was the point. And this is why the jump from 0 to 10,000 changes your life more than any other jump. Because that's where the biggest transformation happens. That's where you go from someone who talks about getting their money together to someone who actually does it. That's where you prove to yourself that you're capable of doing hard things. Everything else builds on that foundation. So let's bring this all together. If you're at 0 right now, or close to it, your only focus should be hitting that $10,000 mark. Not because $10,000 is going to make you rich, but because the person you become while saving that $10,000 is someone who can build real wealth. That's your foundation. Everything else is impossible without it. If you're somewhere between 10 and 100,000, you're in the building phase. This is where you learn patience. This is where you learn about investing, about compound growth, about thinking long term. Don't rush this phase. Don't get discouraged because you're not at a million yet. You're learning the skills that matter. You're becoming the person who can handle serious money. And if you're past 100,000 and climbing toward a million or beyond, remember that the number isn't the point. The point is the freedom, the security, the options, the peace of mind. Make sure you're actually enjoying the benefits of what you're building. Don't get so caught up chasing the next milestone that you forget to live your life. Don't be like Marcus, sitting on millions and miserable because you never learned how to actually be wealthy. The truth is, there's no magic number that makes everything perfect. Not 10,000, not 100,000, not a million, not 10 million. Money solves money problems. It gives you options and security and freedom from certain kinds of stress. But it doesn't fix everything else. It doesn't fix your relationships. It doesn't give your life meaning. It doesn't make you happy if you're miserable. What does make a difference is becoming someone who can build wealth. Someone who's disciplined and patient and thinks long term. Someone who makes good decisions and doesn't panic when things get hard. That transformation is what changes everything. So stop obsessing over the exact number and start focusing on the process. Stop comparing your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. Stop waiting for some magical amount before you start taking this seriously. Start where you are. Build the habits. Become the person. The money will follow. Every single person who has serious wealth today started exactly where you are, at zero or close to it. Scared, confused, not sure if they could actually do it. The only difference between them and people who stay broke forever is that they started and they didn't quit. They built the foundation. They learned the lessons. They became wealthy people. And then becoming actually wealthy was just a matter of time. You can do the same thing. You're capable of way more than you think. That first 10,000 is hard, but it's possible. And once you prove to yourself that you can do it, everything else opens up. You're not building a pile of money. You're building a completely different life. You're building a completely different version of yourself. Subscribe if you want more real talk about money.